Hey, Charles Mackenzie from Infected Blood Australia, coming to you from an absolutely gorgeous Sydney Harbour this Easter Monday evening. But as beautiful as it is, the message here today is about a big secret that this city and this country is keeping. This is Australia's biggest secret. It's also Australia's biggest medical scandal. No one has been more injured or harmed, or no more people have been killed by any other treatment than through blood and through Australia's blood supply. Before the mid-1990s, tens of thousands of Australians were infected with HIV or hepatitis C from blood transfusions or blood infusions. But very few people in Australia know, and very few people around the world know. Well, of course, before the mid-1990s, there was actually a global contaminated blood scandal. That's what the world's starting to realise. In the 1990s, there were commissions of inquiry in Canada which found massive wrongdoing by their Canadian Red Cross and their Canadian blood supply, and big changes happened. The Canadian Red Cross were kicked out of management of blood. Then in Ireland, in 2000, they also had a commission of inquiry that again found massive shortcomings, and big changes were made and help was afforded victims. And now in the United Kingdom, we have Britain's largest ever legal inquiry, which is the Infected Blood Inquiry. And yet there's nothing in Australia. Aid that's been available to victims for the last 30 years or 20 years has not been available here, and yet we've had thousands of victims and thousands of deaths. So why does Australia not help its victims? Well, the first reason for that is Australia has not sought any answers. Victims have been seeking answers from the government and from the Australian Red Cross and the blood products manufacturer CSL for decades, only to be rebutted or refused. So that's a major problem. That stopped us from being able to share with the Australian public the ramifications of Australia's deadliest medical scandal. There was a pathetic Senate committee that looked at the issue, Australia's deadliest medical scandal, in 2004. It was corrupted by lobbyists from CSL, the Australian Red Cross, and from the Australian government. Now, these senators being corrupted came up with one of the most remarkable outcomes of any supposed inquiry that was to look into something like contaminated blood. Every other country that had had investigations into contaminated blood felt that there was a need to help victims. That was an overwhelming outcome, except Australia. In 2004, the Senate inquiry into hepatitis C in the Australian blood supply determined that everything that had gone on in Australia had happened with best science advice. That's right, so all the infections were completely accidental, and everything that had occurred was done with the very best excellence in science. Well, last year, our group found evidence that proved that was a categoric lie. Nothing could have been further than the truth than what the Senate corruptly told victims and their families in 2004. What have they been hiding? What had the Australian government, the Australian Red Cross and CSL been hiding? What has everyone been hiding down here? Well, you see, Australia built one of its largest businesses out of tainted blood. That's right. In 1994, the very company, CSL, that infected 1,750 haemophiliacs with HIV and hepatitis C was privatised. And would you believe it, the former public servants who presided over the fiasco actually ended up making fortunes, and everyone was indemnified, and they walked off into a bright new future, very unlike the 1,400 people they'd just killed. So, what is the big secret? I think it's time to tell you. I've been fighting this for decades because I've known that they're liars, and I've known that they're killers. And the big secret that I'm about to reveal comes at a time when I'm losing my own health. Having watched my group lose 600 members over the years and lots of good friends die, I now face my own failing health. I'm much more fortunate than my friends, I can tell you that much, because they didn't get to this evidence that I did in time. And it's going to give me great satisfaction to be able to share it with you. The Australian government in the 1980s did what no other country did. And they did it because this CSL, this very hungry company, wanted more and more blood donations, even against good sense. And the Australian Red Cross were happy to supply. There were American pharmaceutical companies even involved. Australia used to advertise for blood donors in sexually explicit magazines in the 1980s. They were looking for infectious donors. Yeah, and they included them into the blood supply. It is the most incredible scandal you'll ever likely hear of in your lifetime. So please stay tuned for April.